Welcome back, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. This is Brownlow Books, and I'm going to discuss my rankings for the 5 books in Canada Reads 2023. If you've been watching my reviews of the books, you'll probably not be surprised by my order, but I actually have been ruminating on it for a few days now. I reread Ducks in the context of the Canada Reads theme this year. And yeah, I'm a little surprised at myself, to be honest. I've been going back and forth and thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, is that really what I want? Is that what I want? I don't know. So I think I've got it down to the order that I would put them in. So yes, the bottom 2, I have had a difficult choice between Mexican Gothic and Station 11 because I did not overly care for either of them. One having a much more visceral reaction than the other. So those are definitely my bottom 2. In terms of what I'm actually putting on the bottom, it's Mexican Gothic. It's a fine enough book, but in terms of the theme for this year, which is one book to change your perspective, I don't... what perspective is it changing in who? Like, it's a fine enough little horror story, nice gothicness, but I don't really get its connection to their theme. And it ends up actually on the bottom because I do kind of think that things higher on the list should have a better connection to Canada, where this has no connection to Canada other than the author being Canadian. It's just not it for me. So I put it in spot number 5. We'll put it right up against there. So then, no surprise at what's coming in at 4th for me, Station 11. As I did discuss, I had a very visceral reaction to this. Not a fan of that. Wish I was able to take fucking CBD stuff, but I'm allergic to fucking weed, so no way for me to calm down. It was fine enough. It was a fine enough book. It does have a Canadian connection as the before, set in Canada, Toronto specifically, but it's already a fairly popular book. Like, even Mexican Gothic is like a book talk sensation. It doesn't really need the publicity from getting on Canada Reads. Like, everyone online that I fucking see is like, oh my god, Mexican Gothic, and I'm like, okay, I get it. You like the book. Same goes for Station 11. It's a fucking TV show, for crying out loud. It doesn't need what would come from winning Canada Reads. It already has it. It's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I think... So I found out it's actually been on the long list once before this. And it probably would have done perfectly fine then. Would have been great. But in this current climate of 3 years pandemic, not a fan. Not a fan. In terms of, like, changing perspectives, it's a nice story that's woven together. It's not nice. It's well woven. It's well woven together. You get your little sprinkling of things, and you're just like, this is interesting how it all comes together. But changing perspectives, I don't really know what it's supposed to change my perspective of. Am I supposed to go, it's changed my perspective that the fucking pandemic could have been worse? Like, what? I don't really know. So, for me, somehow this is in number 4. Okay. The next 3. Having... The order I read these in definitely affected them, because you'll remember my review of this one that I'm about to tell you about, and, I loved it. and yet somehow it's only in number 3. So, number 3 for me is actually going to be Hotline. I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful story of, you know, hardship in a homeland and coming to Canada and trying hard to make that your new home against, like, all the fucking odds that are stacked up against you. It is, you know, it's the Canadian dream story, but the end of it felt a little flat for me. Like, she's trained to be a teacher. She can be a teacher. By happenstance of where she ended up in our country, she can't be. And so it just kind of, it sucked for me that she was so willing to take this other job that's not going to be fulfilling, it's not going to be sustainable in the long term. Like, the more I thought about it afterwards, the more I was kind of like, man, that ending wasn't quite it. Didn't quite land the way I would have wanted this to end, you know? Still a really amazing story, made me feel a lot of things. Like, it is, as I said, it is a love letter to Dimitri's mother, and it fucking shows, even if he calls it a love letter to Quebec in the 80s. Like, no, Sam. This is for your mom. It's obvious. So, yeah. It's only going in 3 for me. Now, number 1 and 2. You'll remember me, if you watched it, going in, only having read one book that was on the short list, and that was Ducks. And I was like, fuck yes, a graphic memoir. I fucking love those. I want more people to read them. Blah, 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 all that. And it was like set in my mind that I wanted Ducks to win. And then I read Greenwood. And I was like, I have book hangover. This happens so rarely. What is happening? Okay. So I had slight existential crises of, oh my god, which one of these do I actually want to have win? My second choice is actually Greenwood. In terms of, like, perspective changing, it's a book that's written in an odd perspective, where it's like the tree rings that go into the center of the story, and then they come back out the other side of the story in, like, the years that you're following. I thought that was so interesting, and, like, a thing I'd never seen in a book before, where it's, like, based around the tree, literally. And, like, the way that the family comes together. The family's, like, not actually a family, but they make themselves a family because that's what they see family is. And, like, you know, how many of them would have different views of things that have happened within the family if they just knew a little more information. And so, like, all of the different perspectives of this book, I was just like, oh my god. Like, this is what they mean. This is literally what the theme means. But here I have it in second place. I loved it. It's so Canadian. It's so lovely. I told everyone I know to read this book. And yet I'm putting it in second place. Which has got to tell you a lot about Ducks. It's a honker. With a cat bite already. The initial reading of it, I had read it as an ebook from my library. After I loved it, after it came out as on the short list, I was like, well, I'm gonna fucking buy a hard copy of it. And so I did read it a second time. This time to, like, make sure I was actually looking at it from what the Canada Reads theme is. And I was just like, this is it. You know, this happens in our own backyard and people don't think anything of it. And just, like, those last, like, it's like 2 pages at the very end. Like, she's been using this whole time, like, is this what people are like at home? Or does the oil sands make them crazy and they behave like they would never behave anywhere else? And then she's literally on the street back home and meets a guy from the oil sands that they knew, and he says something just fucking horrific at them because men. And it's just kind of like you think you know a thing, and then someone just goes and, like, fucking confirms it or denies it or whatever to make you think, oh my god, like, It's just, it's delightful and horrible, and, like, the things about stolen land and polluting the environment and, you know, mental health and drug addiction and all these kind of, like, things that happen here as this, like, microcosm of Canada, just literally in Fort Mac. I loved it. Never mind, put aside the fucking fact that, like, it is a graphic memoir. I'm pretty sure when I was looking at it, only one graphic novel has ever been on the short list before for Canada Reads, and it wasn't a nonfiction, it was a fiction. And I want this to be seen as a legitimate format for literature. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a graphic novel. There is nothing wrong with a graphic memoir. People are like, oh, that's not really reading. It fucking is. It's words on a page, ain't it, bitch? Alright, so... I love it, and I want nothing but good things for Kate Beaton, and I really, 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 really hope it wins, because I think it's going to change people's perspectives on both the oil sands and Canada as a whole, and what constitutes literature. Like, it's going beyond the changing of your perspective. It is potentially changing the whole format of what people read. And I think that's what tipped this into number one for me. Is that it is not your typically formatted book. It is a mix of, you know, words and drawn pictures, and it needs to be out there, and more people need to read it. I also like that it's a newer book. It hasn't been languishing on my shelves, making me angry. So, right up here. Are you gonna fit that way? No. You're gonna hang off that way. Oh my god, it's huge. So yeah. Wow. Almost all of these are green. I never noticed. So, that is my ranking for, hopefully, what I hope is going to happen in Canada Reads 2023. Number 5, Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Number 4, Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Number 3, Hotline by Dimitri Nasrallah. Number 2, Greenwood by Michael Christie. And in first place, Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton is really, really how I hope this year is going to go. I do think there's the potential for Mexican Gothic to get higher, in particular, just because the person defending it is a book talker. They're going to be used to that limited amount of time to put forth ideas and things like that. There's the potential for that to be there, but I mean, these two could switch places. I'd be okay with that. Mexican Gothic and Station 11 wouldn't bother me at all. But my top 3 here really are how I hope it goes. There's some good defenders this year. I think that the Canada Reads, it goes so fast. When you're watching an episode, and they're just, like, going through, and then it's just, like, time to vote off a book, and you're like, oh my god, already? Like, oh my god, okay, you know? It's, it'll really depend on its defenders, and, here's hoping for Ducks. Really, really hoping it's Ducks. I love Ducks. The novel. Alright, thanks for hanging out. Canada Reads 2023 can be watched on CBC Gem for free, or I believe they do a radio broadcast as well, which you can listen to on the CBC website. I believe they also put out a podcast with it later, but I'm not 100% sure on that because I've never Never listened to that one. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. Go enjoy some Canada Reads 2023 broadcasting, and I will see you next time.